In a land sealed away from the world for over 2 centuries, peace reigned under the shadow of the shogunate. But in the summer of 1853, the arrival of the black ships shattered the silence, forcing Japan to confront the might of the West and its own uncertain future. The demand was clear: open your ports or be crushed. For the first time in generations, Japan stood at a crossroads. One path leading to war, the other to change. Some sought to defend tradition at any cost, clinging to the honor of the samurai. Others saw the tides of history turning and vowed to lead their nation into a new era. In the face of fire and steel, Japan rose stronger than ever. This is the story of its awakening. This is Blades of Change, the dawn of modern Japan. In a land where tradition breathes through every sunrise, life unfolds with a quiet rhythm. The dawn breaks over misty rice fields, where farmers toil tirelessly, their hands shaping the land that sustains their families. Children's laughter echoes through village streets, where merchants sell their wares, and the hum of a changing world is felt in every whispered negotiation. The streets of Edo buzz with vibrant energy, a collision of the old and the new. Samurai walk with measured grace, their swords glinting in the sunlight, while merchants haggle in markets brimming with fish, rice, and the first signs of Western goods. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer resounds in the distance, crafting tools and swords alike, as if the past and future are being forged in unison. Inside quiet homes, families share tea ceremonies and evening meals, preserving rituals that have endured centuries. In the dojo, young men train with unwavering discipline, the sharp cries of their practice echoing against polished wooden walls. Yet even here, the winds of change sweep through, as Western textbooks arrive in schools, and the hum of steam trains fills the air. At riverbanks and bustling markets, tradition mingles with progress. Wooden boats laden with rice drift alongside steamships, their whistles cutting through the tranquil scenery. In the heart of Kyoto, street performers weave tales of heroism, their vibrant acts reflecting the enduring spirit of the people. Nearby, under the soft glow of paper lanterns, a family bows before a shrine, offering prayers to their ancestors as the nation looks to the heavens for guidance in turbulent times. Through it all, the samurai sits in quiet reflection, his gaze fixed on a horizon dominated by the steel and smoke of a new era. A land of profound beauty and honor stands at the threshold of transformation, poised to rise like the morning sun, blending the legacy of its past with the promise of its future. This is Japan during the Meiji Restoration, a time when daily life becomes a canvas for revolution, and the soul of a nation is redefined. Tradition and innovation, sacrifice and hope. Witness the beauty, the resilience, and the extraordinary journey of a people embracing their destiny. It began with an order, a directive from the highest echelons of the U.S. government.
We have to go to Japan.
The president himself had sanctioned the mission, a bold expedition that would redefine the relationship between East and West. The goal was clear: open Japan's ports to trade and diplomacy, or demonstrate the strength of a modernized America. Commodore Matthew Perry was chosen to lead, a seasoned naval officer whose reputation for discipline and determination preceded him. On a brisk day in Norfolk, Virginia, the ships were prepared for their monumental journey. 4 vessels, including the flagship USS Mississippi and the USS Susquehanna, stood ready. Massive, steam-powered marvels of iron and wood. Their hulls were laden with supplies, barrels of coal to fuel their powerful engines, crates of preserved food, and ample weaponry for defense and intimidation. The crew numbered in the hundreds, Sailors, engineers, and officers, each with their own hopes, fears, and uncertainties about the voyage ahead. The orders were precise. Commodore Perry's task was not simply to deliver a message, but to make an impression. The United States wanted access to Japanese ports for trade, provisions, and security. Perry was instructed to offer gifts of Western innovation, telegraphs, rifles, and even a miniature train, tokens meant to awe the Japanese court and demonstrate the fruits of industrialization. But Perry's orders came with a veiled threat. If diplomacy failed, the overwhelming might of the black ships would speak for itself. "You are to proceed with firmness," the president's letter read. "But above all, you are to avoid unnecessary conflict. The goal is peace, albeit one forged through strength." These words would guide every step of the journey, shaping Perry's interactions with his officers and crew. The voyage would take nearly 6 months, crossing the Atlantic, rounding the southern tip of Africa, and cutting through the Indian Ocean before entering the Pacific. Days at sea were long and grueling. The engines required constant attention, coal furnaces belching smoke day and night. The air below deck was stifling, a mix of heat, soot, and sweat. Sailors took turns shoveling coal, their faces blackened and their muscles aching, while engineers monitored the machinery, ensuring that the engines stayed operational. Meals were simple and repetitive: hardtack, salted meat, and dried beans. Fresh water was rationed, and scurvy was an ever-present threat. To combat illness, the ship's surgeon administered lemon juice and vinegar, though the sour taste made it a begrudged medicine. Despite these efforts, fevers and infections claimed several lives during the journey. Those who died were buried at sea, their bodies lowered into the waves as the crew stood in somber silence. For the sailors, the mission was a mixture of pride and trepidation. Many had never traveled so far from home, nor faced the uncertainty of a nation as enigmatic as Japan. Some saw the expedition as an opportunity for glory, a chance to be part of history. Others feared what lay ahead: hostile waters, foreign diseases, or the possibility of war with a people they didn't understand. "What if they attack us on sight?" a young sailor wondered aloud as the ships prepared to depart. His crewmates reassured him with tales of the ship's cannons, but the fear lingered in his eyes. Officers reminded the crew of their duty, emphasizing discipline and unity, but the undercurrent of unease was impossible to ignore. The journey was fraught with danger. Storms in the Atlantic battered the ships, towering waves washing over the decks and testing the resilience of their iron hulls. At the Cape of Good Hope, treacherous currents forced the fleet to navigate carefully, the risk of collision or grounding ever present. In the Indian Ocean, supplies of coal ran dangerously low, forcing the crew to ration their power and rely on sails whenever possible. In one harrowing incident, a boiler malfunction nearly led to disaster. Engineers worked tirelessly to prevent an explosion, their faces slick with sweat and fear. The crisis was averted, but it left the crew shaken, a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in such a journey. Life on the ships was not without tension. The close quarters bred conflicts between sailors, especially as the monotony of the voyage set in. Fights broke out over petty grievances. Someone taking an extra ration, a perceived insult during a card game. But these were swiftly quelled by officers who understood the importance of maintaining order. Not all interactions were adversarial. Camaraderie developed among the crew through shared hardship. Songs, storytelling, and even makeshift competitions provided brief reprieves from the monotony. Friendships were forged, and rivalries, though heated, rarely escalated beyond words. Yet, underlying it all was a shared anticipation of the unknown. After months of toil and uncertainty, the black ships finally approached the shores of Japan. The coastline rose like a shadow from the mist, its jagged cliffs and quiet villages a stark contrast to the industrial might of the fleet. For the crew, it was a moment of both relief and apprehension. The journey had tested their endurance and resolve, but their mission was far from over. As the ships anchored in Edo Bay, Commodore Perry addressed his officers and crew one last time. "Men," he said, "we are here not as conquerors, but as emissaries of progress. Show these people the strength and dignity of our nation. Let our actions speak louder than words." With those words, the next chapter of history began. The black ships poised to change Japan and the world forever. July 8, 1853, 4 massive black-hulled steamships appear on the horizon of Edo Bay. The USS Susquehanna, USS Mississippi, USS Plymouth, and USS Saratoga cut through the tranquil waters, their towering masts and billowing black smoke striking fear and curiosity into the hearts of the Japanese people. At the helm of this imposing fleet stands Commodore Matthew Perry, the man entrusted with a mission that would change Japan forever. As the ships anchor near Uraga, a small town at the mouth of Edo Bay, Japanese watchmen scramble to alert the ruling Tokugawa shogunate. Panic spreads among the samurai and officials. No foreign fleet this powerful has ever dared to approach the shores of Japan. For over 200 years, under the Sakoku policy, the country has been sealed off from almost all foreign influence, except for limited trade through the Dutch in Nagasaki. Now Perry's arrival challenges this isolation. Japanese patrol boats approach, but the Americans refuse to be turned away. Perry orders a display of naval might. Cannons are loaded, gun ports are opened, and steam engines roar, sending plumes of smoke into the air. The message is clear. These are not ordinary traders, and they will not be ignored. On July 9, 1853, Japanese representatives row out to meet Perry's flagship, the USS Susquehanna. They demand that the fleet leave immediately and take their request for negotiations to Nagasaki, the only port officially open to foreigners. Perry refuses. His orders from U.S. President Millard Fillmore are explicit. He must deliver a letter directly to the shogun's representatives in Edo. The Japanese are unsettled, but Perry's resolve is unshakable. The days that follow are filled with tension. The shogunate, led by Shogun Tokugawa Ieyoshi, is paralyzed by indecision. The unexpected arrival of the Americans creates a crisis at the highest levels of government. Some advisors argue for military resistance, while others, recognizing the overwhelming firepower of the foreign fleet, advocate for diplomacy. Finally, on July 14, 1853, Perry and his delegation land at Kurihama, near modern-day Yokosuka. Escorted by Japanese officials, they march in a formal procession to a temporary meeting hall. There, Commodore Perry presents President Fillmore's letter to the representatives of the shogun. The letter demands the opening of Japanese ports to American trade and the protection of shipwrecked American sailors. With his mission temporarily accomplished, Perry warns that he will return the following year for Japan's official response. He then orders his fleet to depart, leaving behind a nation in crisis. The sudden confrontation with Western military power throws Japan's ruling class into chaos. Factions within the government argue over how to respond. The Bakufu, the ruling military government, hesitates, knowing that resisting the Americans could lead to war. On March 8, 1854, true to his word, Perry returns, this time with an even larger fleet of 9 warships. The sheer scale of the show of force leaves little doubt. Japan can no longer ignore the outside world. Under immense pressure, negotiations begin at Yokohama. After weeks of discussions, on March 31, 1854, the Treaty of Kanagawa is signed. The Treaty of Kanagawa Japan's first official agreement with the United States, marks the beginning of the country's opening to the West. The treaty includes 3 key provisions. First, the ports of Shimoda and Hakodate will be opened for American ships to resupply and seek refuge. Second, American sailors shipwrecked on Japanese shores will receive humane treatment. And third, a U.S. consul will be stationed in Japan, laying the foundation for future diplomatic relations. For the first time in over 2 centuries, Japan is forced to engage with the world beyond its borders. Perry's mission succeeds, but it also sets into motion a chain of events that will lead to the fall of the Tokugawa shogunate and the dawn of the Meiji Restoration in 1868. Commodore Perry departs Japan later in 1854, but his legacy endures. The arrival of the Black Ships is remembered as the moment Japan's destiny changed forever. The once isolated nation will soon embark on a journey of rapid modernization, transforming into a global power within just a few decades. The ripples of Perry's expedition reach far beyond Japan. His success inspires other Western nations, Britain, Russia, and France, to demand their own treaties, further accelerating Japan's integration into the international community. What began as a mission of diplomacy backed by military strength becomes the catalyst for one of the most dramatic transformations in world history. From the still waters of Edo Bay to the storm of revolution that followed, the Black Ships of Commodore Perry did not just open Japan's ports, they opened an empire to the future. The arrival of Perry's fleet sent shockwaves through the Tokugawa shogunate, the military government that had ruled Japan for over 250 years. At its head sat Shogun Tokugawa Ieyoshi, but his rule was weak and his health failing. The question that now haunted the Bakufu was simple. Should Japan resist the foreigners or open its doors to the outside world? The ruling council split into 2 warring factions. On one side stood the Joy, Rangyi faction, the Expel the Barbarians movement, made up of hardline samurai and traditionalists who saw Perry's arrival as an invasion. They called for war, for the destruction of the foreign ships, and the preservation of Japan's sacred isolation. On the other side were the Kaikoku, Kaiguo faction, the Open the Country reformists, who saw the devastating power of Western technology and recognized that Japan could not win a war against the Americans. They argued that Japan must modernize or be conquered like China had been by the British in the Opium Wars just a decade earlier. As the debate raged within Edo Castle, the streets of Japan were alive with fear, curiosity, and defiance. Samurai sharpened their blades, preparing for a possible war. Peasants whispered rumors of foreign devils who breathed fire and carried weapons that could kill from a distance. Merchants, sensing opportunity, imagined the wealth that trade with the West might bring. The nation stood on the edge of an abyss. The indecision of the Bakufu proved fatal. Shogun Tokugawa Ieyoshi died in 1853, just months after Perry's arrival. His successor, Tokugawa Yasada, was weak and easily manipulated. In the chaos, a powerful figure emerged, Ii Naosuke, a high-ranking advisor to the shogunate. Recognizing that resistance was futile, he forced through the Treaty of Kanagawa in 1854, officially opening Japan's ports to the United States. But this decision came at a cost. The Joy faction, furious at what they saw as a betrayal, turned to violence. Assassinations of pro-foreign officials became commonplace. In 1860, Ii Naosuke himself was brutally murdered outside Edo Castle by a group of radical samurai from Mito Domain, a bloody warning to those who sought to modernize Japan. The land was now gripped by chaos. Rival daimyo, lords, began questioning the legitimacy of the Tokugawa rule. Secret alliances formed between clans who wished to overthrow the shogunate, and the old order began to crumble. In the shadows of Kyoto, a powerful movement began to grow. one that called not just for the expulsion of foreigners, but for the restoration of imperial power. They believed that Japan's salvation lay not with the Tokugawa, but with the divine emperor. The young Emperor Meiji, only a child at the time, became the symbolic figurehead of this revolution. Two powerful domains emerged as the leaders of this cause: Choshu and Satsuma. These clans, once bitter enemies, formed a secret alliance in 1866 with one goal: to destroy the Tokugawa shogunate and return power to the emperor. The shogunate responded with force, sending troops to crush the rebellion in the Choshu expedition of 1864. But the resistance was stronger than expected. With modern weapons smuggled in from British traders, the Choshu warriors held their ground. The cracks in the shogunate's power deepened. By 1867, it was clear that the Tokugawa regime was doomed. The last shogun, Tokugawa Yoshinobu, saw the growing storm and chose to abdicate rather than plunge Japan into a full-scale civil war. But his loyalists refused to surrender. In January 1868, the tension exploded into war. The Boshin War had begun. The first battle erupted at Toba Fushimi, near Kyoto, where the shogunate's samurai clashed with the modernized forces of the imperial army. But the Tokugawa troops, still wielding traditional swords and muskets, were no match for the imperial forces armed with modern rifles and cannons. Within days, they were crushed. The war raged on as Tokugawa loyalists fled north, making a last stand in the stronghold of Edo. But the tide of history had already turned. In April 1868, Edo Castle, once the seat of Tokugawa power, was peacefully surrendered to the new government. The shogunate was officially abolished, and the young Emperor Meiji was restored to power. For the first time in over 700 years, the emperor ruled Japan once more. With the fall of the Tokugawa, Japan stood at the threshold of a new world. The emperor, now guided by reformist leaders, launched a radical transformation of the nation. The feudal system was abolished, the samurai class dismantled, and a new Western-style government was created. Railroads, telegraphs, and modern industries began to spread across the country. The military was restructured with the help of European advisors, and Japan embraced foreign technology. Within just a few decades, Japan had gone from an isolated feudal state to an industrialized world power, ready to stand on equal footing with the very nations that once threatened to dominate it. But the cost had been great. Thousands had died in the battles that shaped the new Japan. The old ways of the samurai had been cast aside, their swords no longer the measure of power. The ghosts of the past lingered in the hearts of many, but the future had been decided. What began with the arrival of the black ships in 1853 ended with the birth of a modern empire. The struggle for Japan's future had been fought in the halls of power, on blood-stained battlefields, and in the hearts of its people. From isolation to transformation, Japan had awakened, and the world would never be the same.